Hello and welcome. Today I am going to discuss 3 different principles that will help a learner attend to the essential material. This is done through effective instructional design, and the principles that are going to be discussed follow what Mayer and Fiorella have suggested on how we can focus a learner. Following this discussion, I will also show you 3 different instances where I have used these different principles in some of my teaching. So what I'd like for you to do as I go through those is to see if you can identify which of those 3 principles is being used or observed in each of the slides. But first things first, we're going to talk about the 3 different principles. You can see in the picture here that there is a theme of redundant text in this story, especially if I were to show this slide and then read the words exactly as they are presented here in this picture. So the redundancy principle states that a learner is going to learn better when we present them with a picture and words such as a narration or text, but not a picture, narration, and text all at the same time. By doing this and only presenting them with the 2 different sources of information, we're avoiding overloading their system and not having them focus too much on visual, auditory, and cognitive processing all at once. The cognitive load theory looks at information we cannot acquire on our own. This is information we have to get from somebody else, such as a teacher. And in the case of somebody attempting to gain new knowledge, there are going to be different types of cognitive load that they experience. The one that relates more to the redundancy principle is that of extraneous cognitive load, or load that they experience as a result of the instructional design being ineffective. The redundancy principle works according to the cognitive theory of multimedia learning, in that this theory essentially asserts that the instructor should try to eliminate as much redundant text as possible. And you can see here in this example, the picture that I've provided here, that I have essentially followed the redundancy principle by only providing you with a heading and a picture and not a narration as well in terms of words. All you have is the picture. So I am reading my narration to you or teaching you, and that way you can just look at the picture and listen to what it is that I'm saying. The next principle we're going to talk about is the spatial contiguity principle. And look at the slide here that I have. And let's say that I'm teaching children how to spell the names of the animals shown in the pictures, okay? So the first one you see in the picture is actually a cow. Well, what's the word that's listed beside the cow? It says pig. So as you can see, the names are not next to the animal. They're on the same line, but it may not be the right word that goes with the picture. So a learner may incorrectly associate the word pig with the picture of a cow. So when following the spatial contiguity principle, an instructional designer or a teacher should place the word right next to the picture to save the learner from getting confused by having to scan the page and then matching the name to the picture, especially in cases where the learner is new to the content and they may not know the word and how it's spelled, such as an English language learner, somebody who is just learning English, or maybe a child who is young and trying to learn how to spell. So this picture here is an example of the spatial contiguity principle, where the words are listed right next to the picture, so that the learner doesn't have to look back and forth between the picture and the words, trying to match the meaning of the word to the actual picture. So according to the cognitive theory of multimedia learning, one of the ways that we can help learners to manage the extraneous information they are taking in is by making sure that we put within the same space the word and the picture, or the meaning of the picture beside the actual picture itself. And by doing so, we're giving them more time to actually process the information versus having them scan the page and trying to figure out what picture goes with what word. The third principle to help reduce extraneous cognitive load is the signaling principle. By using this principle, the teacher is pointing the learner's attention to the important components of the presentation. The idea behind this principle is that it teaches the learner to focus on the information that's important. So for the example that we have here in this slide, This is something that I would want to avoid because there is no highlighting, no signaling, telling the learner what it is that they need to look at. It doesn't point them to anything important. So in this sample here, if I were teaching a unit on proper nouns, you can see this is the exact same paragraph that was just on the last slide. And you can see that each proper noun is highlighted, underlined, and capitalized because proper nouns should be capitalized. In the last example that you saw, nothing was capitalized, there were no highlights, there were no underlined words, nothing that would point the learners to the important information. So this principle works according to the cognitive theory of multimedia learning because it helps to reduce extraneous overload on the learner by showing the learner where he or she should focus their attention. There's no adding to, there's no taking away of information that's presented on the slide, but basically the change in font and underlining, using highlighting, things like that, it does show the learner the important information that they need to learn. So now we're going to talk about my specific examples, and what I'd like for you to do is to see if you can pick out each of the 3 different principles that I just discussed and try to remember what it is that we've talked about. Hopefully you took notes, so you should be able to pick out which principle is being used on these next 3 slides. So we're going to talk about inclusion in physical education and in adapted physical education today. So inclusion in physical education can mean many different things. From what you can see here in this picture, this is a student with a disability, so you have a guy in a wheelchair, and he is participating on a sports team with his peers, so other people his age, that do not have disabilities. This is an example of inclusion. According to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, students who have disabilities should be placed in their least restrictive environment. This means they're going to be placed in an environment where they can be the most successful. So for this guy here, you can see that his least restrictive environment is an inclusive environment where he is being educated with his peers who have no disabilities. However, some individuals have more severe disabilities and they may not be able to be educated in the inclusive setting that you see here in this picture. Instead, they will be put into a more segregated setting, which is called adapted physical education. In an inclusive setting, you're going to have an instance where individuals both with and without disabilities are being educated and interacting together. So everybody's active, everybody's engaged, everybody's participating in the same activities, the same lesson. So that's going to be the example that you're going to see here in this picture on the left. Now the picture on the right is more of an adapted setting. So if you look at the students in the picture, everybody in there is in a wheelchair. So that means they all have disabilities. And that is an example of an adapted setting where they're educated only with other students who have disabilities. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, mentions physical education as the only subject matter for students with disabilities. This is the only subject that they actually are required to take. The only one. Anything else is not required. So in this case, physical education is going to be what we call a direct or a required service. It is required by law. And again, the example there would be physical education. Anything else is going to be a related service. And related services are not required to be on the IEP or Individualized Education Plan. And that basically means that if I have a disability and I am able to move just fine, I have no issues moving from one place to another, I'm not going to need physical therapy, occupational therapy. If I have no problem speaking, I'm not going to need speech therapy. However, some students do need those things. So in that case, if I have cerebral palsy, for example, and have a hard time walking or have problems with flexibility, then physical or occupational therapy might be something that I will in fact need. But in this case, physical therapy is going to be what we call a related service. So it's not required by law. And the example that I give you here is speech therapy. So hopefully you were able to see the examples of the spatial contiguity principle, the redundancy principle, and the signaling principle illustrated in the 3 slides that I just showed you.